there was a lot that I really appreciate from my dad. He gave me the best and worst advice, and I talked about this a lot, is that when I was faced with challenges, even personal life or professional life, he'd always just reply that you'll figure it out. What's up, guys? That is Coffee Break, episode 12, and we got a bunch of questions this week, but we're going to dig into just a few of them. One I wanted to dig into is, do you have any advice for someone working for a family member and the company cannot grow because of mismanagement at the top? This one's really interesting and speaks, truly to me, because I worked for my father for 11 years. Working for family, I feel like we talk about this a lot on the Modern Craftsman podcast, but I've talked a lot about this, off camera or offline, and it's difficult because a lot of people, there's a group of people that do really well working with family members, and then there's the other group that they just butt heads. So I think really defining whether or not, or what group you're in early on is really important. And for me, I worked for my dad since I was 11 years old all the way to 22. I swept the floors. He owned a fence company, so my job was basically unpackaging thousands of metal chain link fittings and putting them into these handmade bins to supply the fence contractors and people that came to the counter. But for me, working for my dad for so long, I realized that we had just a different view on how we were structured. And we had different views on business, we had different views on how things should get done. But there was a lot that I really appreciate from my dad, and I always say that there was, he gave me the best and worst advice, and I talk about this a lot, is that when I was faced with challenges, even personal life or professional life, he'd always just reply that you'll figure it out. And I always hated him for that. It always drove me crazy that he would answer it that, because I really wanted him to dig into almost like this, answering a question with some context. But at the same time, I really appreciated it because it made me, take my, not so much anger or aggression, but really focus on finding the solution myself. But as I got older and we started working together, more, and I started having more opinions, I realized that we just didn't see things the same way. And that wasn't that my way was right and his was wrong, or vice versa. It was just that we were strictly looking at things very differently. And I was presented with an opportunity to leave my father when I graduated college. I had originally declined the offer, and then they had reached back out and gave me a second offer, and to which I accepted and left. And it can be a story for another time. It put a really it made my relationship with my dad very difficult for many months. Fast forward to today, especially when I started my own company, he was really excited because that's what inevitably he wanted me to do, is start my own company, and we have a fantastic relationship now. But while we're in that, and to speak to those that might be in a position where they're butting heads with a family member and feel as though the growth of the company is stunted because of that, I think it really depends on what position that person that asked the question might be in. And if maybe you're at the lower level and you're looking to, and I think that's what the question said, you're looking up to the upper management and you're trying to weigh in or have some input on how things should get done, and you're not seeing that reciprocated, I think what needs to happen is you need to have the realization that this might not be the right opportunity for you. And that's really difficult. My brother just recently left my father's company, and him and I had this conversation, and my brother and my father are very similar in the sense that, and I'm sure my father's going to listen to this, that they're very stubborn. But I had the same exact conversation with both of them, is that if this isn't the right fit, stop forcing it. But what they both need to do is they both need to sit down and explain what is important to them in their personal life and in their professional life. How can they grow from this? How can they learn from each other? Can they have an open forum where they can bring ideas to the table, where they're not necessarily combating what the other is doing, but outlining, hey, I'd love to see the company grow in this manner, and these are the things that I think are important, and really focus on what, I guess in one way to put it is the positive side of it. And you almost have to look at it as like a relationship or, even a marriage, in the sense that try not to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, I have a better idea. Instead, look at it as, here's how I think we can improve this, and this is what we can do, and really, portray it as a team effort. It's, it's not you coming in and replacing them. It's not you coming in and stepping on their toes. It's you looking for a solution that both of you guys can work towards. And depending on how that conversation goes is gonna really dictate what your next move is. If that conversation is not heard and the other is, too combative or just doesn't want to, be adaptable to what you're bringing to the table. Maybe you're too young, you don't know what you're talking about. The other has been doing this for 50 plus years. Whatever the case is, that might be a point in time where you have to decide that this isn't the right fit for me. You probably at that point don't feel as though you're valued for what you bring to the table, and at that point you do need to step away. And stepping away from the family business is very difficult. I had alluded to the fact that it put a damper on my relationship with my father, and it did, but I understood that this was the best move for me, which later on turned out to be really great for my father's relationship and mine, because we have a much better relationship where, when we were in the presence of each other, it wasn't about work anymore, it wasn't about stress, it was just about life. And that, looking back, was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. So I think really what it comes down to is having the conversation with that upper management and seeing if you guys can align your values. And if you can't, it might really be the time where you have to separate it. So I'm gonna give this guy a bone because he didn't ask a question. He demanded that I dig into hiring. This one's fun for me because we recently, and Doug, when this comes out tomorrow? Today. Comes out today. This is live, guys. Just recently hired 7 people. And that's a huge amount of people. And the hiring process for all of them, actually the majority of them, was very long. It was multiple conversations, it was phone conversations, it was Zoom meetings, it was in-person meetings, it was bringing them to the job site, meeting some of the people, meeting some of the PMs one-on-one. Like, there was all these different steps and all these different things that I was trying to, capture as much information from them as possible to really understand who they were as individuals. But let's go way back, and I'm doing this, and Mike's sitting to the side of me, so I'm gonna speak really highly of him, followed by Ken, who's also sitting, being exponential, getting some extra work done today. But I think way back when it, and I had talked about this in episode 11, is that I started out with family and friends, and I had let them go when I had hired Mike, and Mike came in to replace, at the time I didn't know, but he ended up replacing my role as a carpenter. I was a carpenter on site, I was looking to hire another carpenter. Mike came in, was a carpenter. I realized I could step out of the tool belt and focus on growing the business and selling more work, because Mike could inevitably run that job. He's worked from a carpenter now into a project manager. I think about Ken. Ken came in, to this office that we're sitting in. It was a crappy carpeted warehouse with, storage in the back. And, we sat down and talked about his career in cabinet making and how he wanted to come to NS Builders, and we were gonna, my plan was to build a cabinet shop, and he was on board with that. But they didn't just come here because they were sick of their other job. It was really about presenting opportunity, and I would attribute that to everyone that's part of this team now. One of the most common things that I hear, especially even in our recent hiring, is that people are in this career, they have a job that they actually that they enjoy. They like what they do every day, they like the company they're working for, but the number one complaint is usually that they don't feel as though they're given the opportunity to really shine. They're not given the opportunity to take the time necessary to do a really great job, and schedule or time frame is really set as a number one, where we talk about it a lot, the rip it out mentality, things like that. Is quality is really our number one, and that means it comes before anything else. If it takes us longer and we inevitably hurt our reputation because we took too long on a job, I'll never look back regretting that, because I will always consider that we did the very best job that we could, and we put our best foot forward, and quality was our number one. And what that did is, by sharing that and kind of broadcasting that, other people realize that, hey, I could work for a company that puts us as number one, and I can take the time and the opportunity to really shine. And I think, a lot of these people have realized that, I could work for a company that puts us first and gives me the time and the opportunity to really shine and not be so, constrained by time frame, and giving the opportunity to, focused on cool projects and focused on really high detail, great clients, a great atmosphere. We can talk about the culture of how we operate. We talked about vacation policy and how, the work-life balance, and we've talked about all of that. But what I think really comes down to hiring is creating an opportunity for people individually. And they need to feel as though that they're leaving a company that they probably like to pursue another opportunity with a company that, they believe that they like, but for a good reason. And that good reason is because they have greater opportunity and a greater, ability to showcase their skill. And that's really what it comes down to. Every single person has come in one way or the other, has communicated that is the biggest struggle. Whether it's, there's no growth in the company, so I'm kind of stuck in this role, and I'll never see growth from here, or I'm doing, really great work, but it's always about schedule, or it comes down to, we're doing great work, but we have, it's always I'm always thrown into the fire, and there's no, it's like, hey, come clean this up and fix this. I know you'll do a good job at it. It's, this holistic look at, like, these are your projects. People come in, and these are their projects as much as it is mine, as much as it is the company's. It's like, we are full service. We have project managers, carpenters, cabinet makers, and fitters. These guys are working on projects from day one, and we're sharing that, and that I want that to be as much theirs as it is, like I said, mine and the company's. So I really think, what it comes down to hiring, the number one thing is create an opportunity that is solving a problem that they're having somewhere else. Everything else, the culture, the benefits, the pay, that all has to come with it. You have to set up a package that is all inclusive, and you're treating them more than fairly, you're paying them more than fairly, all of that, but really create that opportunity in the beginning. And I think that's where a lot of people slack in, and it's just, hey, perfect example, talking about hiring someone and putting a post out. Most of the time you're seeing help wanted or hiring, where we take another approach. It's like, I think one of our most successful posts that we did for hiring was, it was something along the lines, and Doug, maybe we can go back, but it said, your job sucks, or something along the lines. So instantly grabbed someone's attention, and you read into it, and it was like, well, maybe your job doesn't suck, but there's a lot of things that you hate about your job, even though you love your job. And it goes on to explain how we can correct that. And it spoke to a lot of people, because that's exactly how they felt, because I know that because people tell me that. And that's, we came in with a solution to, even just the smallest problem to an otherwise great opportunity that they already have. Give them a better opportunity. All right, I like this one. All right, here's a technical one from a trade perspective. Where do you think carpenter responsibility ends and painters begin? How far do your carpenters get things perfect? More for trim carpentry than cabinetry. Thanks for your time. I don't know why I read that last part. You're welcome. This is a really easy one. I don't think any carpenter should be approaching something saying that I'm going to take it X far because the painter will make it look better beyond that. Everything we do, I guess if you want to simplify it, paint grade, stain grade, treat it as stain grade. Because if you're getting this mindset of paint grade versus stain grade, and it's paint grade, I can blast the nails wherever they'll get filled, or, I don't have to be as tight with my miter or my coat because it will get caulked. That's a bad mentality to be put in, because if, say you're doing 2-3 jobs of paint grade and then you have to go back to stain grade, you're relearning that. You're refine tuning, where it's like, if you just go into this putting your best foot forward every single time, paint grade or stain grade, you're always refining, you're always getting better. And that just goes right back to the rip it out mentality. It's, if you look at I challenge everyone, including myself. If I do complete something, I stand back and I look at it and I say, that's not the best I could do it again. And yeah, that's gonna take time, but in the long run, in the big picture, doing it again is giving you an opportunity to become more refined at that process right then and there. So then the next time and the next 20 times you're getting these incremental steps better and better and better and better, where it's like you let something slide once, it's easy to let something slide again and again and again, where if you hold yourself accountable for even the smallest mistakes, I get it, efficiency is out the door, you're losing time, you're losing money, etc. Screw that. Honestly, just look at this as an opportunity to be better and to incrementally take these steps to being, completely refined at something. So to answer the question, where does trim carpentry's responsibility stop and start? I mean, the carpenter completes his task at the very highest level. I know for me, I used to fill all my nail holes at least first pass and give it a quick sand. At this time, that's not what we're doing, but we're working with the painter and we're making sure that we're delivering a product that is to a level that is ready for them, that they're not overworking our work and trying to make something look like it's not. So, from that technical side, put your best foot forward and complete, your cuts. Your nail layout should, actually I think we talked about this on the Modern Craftsman podcast, is that think about when you're nailing crown molding, especially with a nail gun, think about how they used to do it by hand. And, if you're nailing a piece of crown up and you're using the nail gun to kind of twist it in place and blast nail and hold it where it was, think about how what that would have taken to do by hand. And if you couldn't nail where you're about to put a nail by hand, it probably doesn't belong there. And if you think about that and think about how they used to nail, moldings and trims on homes by hand, they had to be really precise, because you weren't using a nail gun to hold something up and blast a nail to hold it in place. You were relying on your craftsmanship and your cut and your precise and the level of preciseness that you were doing everything, and then the nails were simply holding it in place. So I think that's a really good analogy of what how you should approach these things. And again, it's consistently put your best foot forward and really, really focus on refining that and rip it out if it doesn't look good. So I know we have a handful of other questions that came in last week, but I don't want that to stop. So if you guys have questions, make sure you leave it in the comments below. As always, we appreciate you watching this coffee break episode. Make sure you check out our new series, Site Visits. That is a more raw look at the day-to-day, kind of like Instagram stories, but on steroids and much longer, and using a fisheye GoPro. So super cool series that we've just launched. And of course, stay tuned for a future episode of Crafted. And until then, we'll see you guys next week.